I'm going to show you the introductions to JavaScript, specifically with jQuery. Now, jQuery will allow you to manipulate the DOM. Now, DOM sounds like a big complicated word, but really, like you can just do a quick Google search for the DOM. It's the document object notation, or model. Sorry, but it's a object model notation. You can just read this little description. It's exactly what it sounds like it is. It's for interacting with the HTML that's on the page. That's all you have to know. And I'm going to use that term a lot because this is actually the DOM. It's not the source code. The source code is actually the raw code that goes in before anything is done to it. The DOM is how the HTML behaves later down the line. Now, the first hello world with JavaScript, we can actually do from the console. We don't have to write any code from maybe our HTML sheet or our JavaScript sheet. So let's do this, and we're going to do a console. So there's two ways of debugging that I like to do. I like to do a console log, and so you can see how it says console log. The other way is to do an alert. You can do the same thing. And it gives me an alert. Now, what if we want to set a variable? Maybe make the variable hello world. We can do var hello equals hello world. And now if I go over here and call hello, and you can see if I type just H, you can see it actually comes up in here. Or I can actually call this with the console. So the console can be used to call some variables. Oh, sorry, I meant to call the variable string. And you can see that it is the same thing because it gets me a string, and it actually is calling a variable. Now that's really the first step into using console, and console is really a very nice thing. Each browser actually has console in a slightly different way. Some have it at the bottom over here, like Safari, but they all usually have a console tab like this. And they all kind of work in the same way. Now, let's say we want to run the same kind of hello world script within our file. We can actually do it in two ways, and I'm going to show you both. We can do it through a script tag. I spelled script wrong. I'm going to give it a type JavaScript, which isn't nearly necessary, but it is kind of a nice thing to do. And I'm going to do a console.log what's up. And you can see if I refresh it, it runs just right at the page. So that's great. Now, what's better practice, instead of doing this within the same HTML document, is doing this from a separate JavaScript file that we're called from. Now, I like to call them from a main.js. And I already have this open. This is within my JavaScript folder. So let's call this, and we're going to say this is from main.js. You can see that it ran. Notice the order that it ran in. Oh, I forgot to save this, but if I do a few Command Z's, you can see that this came after it. Now I'm going to remove this, make sure I save it. You can see that it comes after. But you can see that this actually was called first, and then it ran. Now, what I love to use is jQuery, and I think jQuery is by far the easiest thing to use in JavaScript. A lot of people will argue with me, but because there's other things that might be easier to use. But overall, I think jQuery is a nice thing. Now the first step with jQuery is making sure your jQuery is loaded in the right place. So I'm going to show you two examples, one that works, one that doesn't. And we're going to call console.log, and we're going to make sure that jQuery is being loaded. And you can see that it returns something. Now, let's say we did this and we didn't load jQuery at all. So I'm going to delete this temporarily. You can see that this doesn't work, saying that it's not defined and it's not working. We get an error. Now, if I redo this, it now works. A big error that a lot of people make is they load their jQuery first. And you can see we're getting the same error. So order does matter. We just want to make sure that we're loading in the jQuery before we load in the main.js or load in anything with jQuery. Now, let's actually use jQuery for something, and just something that's elementary. To go over everything in jQuery in this video is way too big. There's way too many things to do. But let's make a selection. And for this task, I want to make this logo. I want to make it red. So my CSS for this, I wanted to make it red. You can see the style changed over here. So we want to do that in jQuery. So the first thing to do is we want to select something, and we want to select the ID, and we have an ID of logo. Now the way of doing a selection in jQuery was we first call jQuery, and then we call the selection like this. Now it's exactly the same as CSS. And let's actually set this to a variable so we can see it first. We're going to go var logo equals this. And let's just make sure that we actually get this selection correct. We're going to go back to our console and refresh. And you can see that it actually does get everything. And you can see that it gives some information about our product or our selection. You can see there's only one item because it's just that one logo. Now let's manipulate it. To manipulate it, we can take this logo and we're going to make it adjust the CSS. And they have a CSS function. The CSS function for background, and there's multiple ways of doing this, by the way. And you should look up the CSS function. We're going to just make the background red. You can see, oh, I meant to make the color red, but that works too. Now if we go and inspect the DOM of this, you can actually see that the style changed in here. It manipulated it. And that's kind of a nice little thing that jQuery will do for you. And you can adjust any CSS you want. You can also do animations. You can do whatever you want. It's really nice. Now, one thing you'll see with jQuery a lot is you'll see this $sign. A lot of people use the $sign to make selections. Now, let's say I save this and I refresh. You can see it actually does work, and probably the reason why it's working is because of the $sign is already being defined. Now, that's most likely a Bootstrap thing, so that's nice, and you can still use it. Sometimes if you're not using Bootstrap, you will have the $sign and it's not being defined. And the way to fix this is just to set it equal to jQuery up at the top. And we can do that, and you can see that that is the same thing, even though I'm redefining the $sign. This isn't the best example because I couldn't make it not work. But I can tell you if you got rid of Bootstrap, and it would work. But there are two ways of doing it, by using either the jQuery or the $sign. And both are kind of used interchangeably in the web. So if you're reading someone else's code, you'll notice that. The next thing about selections is selecting multiple items at once. And let's go ahead and remove this. And a good example of removing everything at once would be these LIs. Let's say I want to select all of these. Now, similar to CSS, we want to select everything within here. So let's go in here and let's call, we're going to call like .nav, and we're going to get all the LIs within it. So let's call this var selection equals. And you can see that nothing happened. So we can actually call this selection based off that because we have a variable defined. Or we can also call the console.log selection. Now, check this out. Now, instead of just having one element, it has 5, because there's 5 different elements, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And each one, you can see, has some information about it. Because we have the selection made, we can actually adjust qualities about these all at once. So if I go over to selection.css and we want to make our background red, just like in our previous demo, we can do that, and it's going to make the background of each red. And if I go over and look at the DOM, you can see that the style for each one of these changed. So you can actually manipulate entire sections on pages with minimal work, just like you would do with CSS. It's the same kind of techniques. jQuery also allows you to manipulate in custom ways. So you can go in and add classes, remove classes, and then manipulate upon those later down the line. This is just an intro, so we're not going to get into that too much, but I hope this helped you to understand the basics of how jQuery works, at least with the selecting, getting it to work with the hello world. Cool, and this has been a good presentation. Let me know if you have any questions and if there's anything that you want me to cover. Talk to you soon. Bye.